The insult came on a Tuesday morning, loud enough for 200 people to hear, and it came from a man who had spent 30 years believing his voice was the most important thing in any room he entered. He looked at a 13-year-old boy in worn sneakers and a faded gray hoodie and said, with the calm certainty of someone who had never once been told he was wrong, "Get this kid off my court. He smells like the block he crawled in from." This program is built for champions, not charity cases, who wandered in off whatever corner their mama works. The boy did not flinch. He looked up at the former NBA champion, the man whose face was on the banner hanging above the court, and he said, barely above a whisper, 3 plays, 1-on-1. Score once and you owe me $100 million. You will not stop me. And the laughter that followed shook the rafters of that building like a thunderclap inside a church. 6 weeks later, that laughter cost everything. What did a 13-year-old boy from Compton know that a 2-time NBA champion didn't? The answer started 11 years before that moment, on a court with no net, in a neighborhood where the sun came up like it was trying to burn something down for good. Compton sits 12 miles south of downtown Los Angeles, and the distance between those two places is not measured in miles. It is measured in everything else. Cracked sidewalks that the city repaves when cameras arrive and forgets the moment they leave. Corner stores with iron gates that stay half closed even in the middle of the afternoon. Streetlights that flicker like they are asking a question nobody ever bothers to answer. Jordan basketball courts, public courts, free courts, courts that belong to whoever shows up first and stays the latest. On one of those courts, on a patch of asphalt behind the Willowbrook Community Center, where the paint had faded so far you had to imagine the three-point line into existence, Marcus Cole played alone every morning at 5:30. 13 years old, 62 inches tall, a second-hand basketball with a slow leak he reinflated every third day with a hand pump he kept in his backpack. He wore a knee brace on his left knee, old black neoprene, worn at the edges with 2 letters stitched in white thread on the inner panel. DC. He wore it every single morning without exception. It never left his body when he was on a court. He dribbled low and fast, changing hands like the ball was an extension of thought rather than something he was controlling. He drove left, planted, crossed back right, rose off 1 foot, and released the ball at the top of his jump with a softness that did not match the sharpness of everything else about him. He did not look like a boy who had learned basketball. He looked like a boy who had been born already knowing it and was simply remembering what his body had always understood. On the chain-link fence at the edge of the court, an old man sat on an overturned milk crate with a clipboard on his knee and a stopwatch in his hand. His name was Roosevelt Webb. 67 years old, gray at the temples, a body that had once been powerful and still carried the memory of that power in the way he held himself upright. He watched Marcus with eyes that did not miss a single thing. Every drive, every pivot, every release point noted in a spiral notebook he had been filling for 5 years. Not casual observations, not a diary, data, first step explosion times, left hand versus right hand completion percentages at the rim, pull-up accuracy from 7 distinct spots on the floor, 4 notebooks, 140 pages of a boy becoming something that had no name yet. At 6:15, a woman appeared at the fence in scrubs the color of the sky before sunrise. Sandra Cole. 36 years old, night shift at Martin Luther King Jr. Community Hospital, 12 hours behind her and another 12 already waiting. She carried a brown paper bag through the gap in the fence, 2 wrapped biscuits, a banana, a bottle of water. Hey, she handed the bag to Marcus without stopping his drill. She watched him take a mid-range pull-up from the left elbow and sink it without touching the rim. Her eyes did what eyes do when they are holding 2 things at once, pride and a grief so old it had become part of her face, living side by side like neighbors who stopped speaking years ago, but still share a wall. She said to Roosevelt without looking at him, "Same time tomorrow?" Roosevelt said, "Same time every day until it matters." She pressed her fingers once against the fence, turned and walked back toward the parking lot. Double shift, same as yesterday, same as it would be tomorrow and the day after that. 3 miles north and an entire world away, a different kind of basketball was happening. In the Westside Elite Youth Basketball Academy occupied a converted warehouse in Culver City that had been gutted and rebuilt into something that resembled a professional training facility more than anything built for children. 6 regulation courts with floating hardwood floors imported from the same mill that supplied 2 NBA franchises. A performance lab with force plates and motion capture cameras. A nutrition bar staffed by a registered dietitian. A trophy corridor that stretched 40 feet and was lit from behind like the inside of a cathedral. Annual membership, $4,800. Wait list, 18 months. Parking lot full of vehicles that had never once driven through Compton. At the center of all of it, Darnell Cross, 49 years old, 6'4", is still moving through a room like he owned the floor beneath him, because in this building he did. 2 NBA championships, 4 All-Star selections, career shooting percentage that still held up against anyone who had played the game in the last 30 years. He retired at 41, built a business empire that stretched from endorsement consulting to real estate development, and came back to youth basketball because there is a particular kind of man who needs an audience to confirm he still exists. He ran the academy with absolute authority and the unshakable belief that talent was something you either carried in your bloodline or you didn't, and that bloodline had a zip code. He said things like standards and culture and the right kind of player. So often they had lost all shape and become something else entirely. Something with a harder edge that people in his circle understood without needing it explained. His son, Darnell Cross, was 15, trained every afternoon by a private coach who charged $350 an hour. Devin was talented, technically disciplined, good footwork, a reliable mid-range game. He had never once in his life played on a court where the rim was bent, or the asphalt was cracked, or the ball had a slow leak. He had never eaten breakfast from a paper bag while his mother turned and walked back into a double shift. He had everything Marcus Cole did not. Marcus Cole had something Darnell Cross would never be able to purchase. But that part comes later, because first a flyer appeared on the bulletin board inside the Willowbrook Community Center, and it changed everything. Roosevelt found it on a Wednesday afternoon. He stood in front of it for a long time without moving. The flyer said, "Future Stars Open Showcase. All youth players welcome. Westside Elite Youth Basketball Academy. Saturday, 10 a.m. Roosevelt read the words, "All youth players welcome" 3 times. He knew what welcome meant inside a place like that. It meant welcome if you had the registration fee. Welcome if you arrived in the right car. Welcome if your shoes were new and your jersey had your name embroidered across the back. But the flyer was printed in black and white does not lie the same way people do. He brought it to Marcus the next morning, setting it flat on the milk crate while the boy was retaping his wrist. Marcus read it the way he read everything, quiet and still, absorbing. Roosevelt said, "Will you walk in there and you show them what you are, and they cannot pretend you do not exist. Your father never got the floor he deserved. You will get yours." Marcus folded the flyer once and put it in the front pocket of his backpack. He did not smile. He gave Roosevelt the same single nod Roosevelt gave him before every hard drill. The language of 2 people who do not waste words on things that can be said with a look. Saturday morning, Marcus took the bus. 40 minutes, 1 transfer, standing both ways because the seats were full. He stepped off 2 blocks from the academy and walked the rest in the early heat, past a row of eucalyptus trees planted in concrete squares, past a coffee shop where a latte cost $9, past a parking attendant who watched him walk by with an expression that asked a question Marcus had been answering his whole life just by existing. Inside the academy, the air was different, cooled to exactly 68 degrees. The squeak of brand new sneakers on hardwood floors that reflected the overhead lights back up like still water. Boys in matching training sets moved through drills with the easy confidence of people who had never once had to fight for space. Parents stood along the wall filming on phones that cost more than Sandra Cole's monthly rent. Marcus found the check-in table near the entrance. A man with a lanyard looked at Marcus's address on the form, a Compton zip code, and his face did the thing faces do when they have been trained to be polite, but have not been trained well enough. He said, "Registration is $250. Marcus had $22 in his pocket. He had not known. Roosevelt had not known. Nobody from their side of that 12-mile distance had been told. He stood at the table while families moved around him with credit cards held out like keys. A boy behind him said to his father, "Loud enough. Is he in the right place?" Marcus steadied himself. He looked at the check-in man and said, "I don't need a full tryout. Just let me play. 3 plays. That's all." And then a voice crossed the gym floor like a blade through everything else. Darnell Cross walked toward the check-in table the way a man walks when he has decided something before he arrives. His eyes found Marcus in under 3 seconds, and what his face did in the next moment did not bother hiding itself behind anything at all. He looked at Marcus the way you look at something that has landed in a place it does not belong. The worn sneakers, the faded hoodie, the old knee brace with the stitched initials, the $22 that were not enough. He stopped close enough that Marcus had to look up. Cross said, "Who let you in here?" Marcus opened his mouth. Cross did not let him speak. "I mean that seriously. Who looked at this and decided this was appropriate for this facility?" He gestured at Marcus the way you gesture at a problem rather than a person. "You walked off the bus, correct?" "I can tell. This floor was installed for $60,000. The air system in this building costs more per month than I'd guess your family spends on everything. And you're standing here with a ball that's half deflated and a brace that should have been thrown away before you were born, asking for my time." He leaned slightly forward. "Let me explain something clearly, son. This program is for athletes who have been developed correctly by real coaches with real resources in real programs. Not every child who picks up a ball deserves to stand here. That's not cruelty. That's just the truth about how the world is built. And the world is built by people like me, not people from wherever it is you walked in from." He paused, looked at the knee brace, looked back at Marcus's face. "Is that your father's? Did he teach you to play?" Cross let the silence after that sentence do the work he had decided not to do with words. Every parent within earshot had heard every word. Some looked at the floor, and none of them spoke. Devin Cross and 3 other boys had stopped their drill and were watching from half court. Devin called out, with a grin that had learned itself from his father's face, "Nice brace, man. Where'd you get it? A donation bin?" The boys laughed. The sound was bright and clean and ugly all at once, bouncing off $60,000 hardwood floors and coming back twice as loud. A security guard appeared at Marcus's left side. "Time to go, son. Let's move." Marcus looked at the guard's hand on his arm. Then he looked past him, past Devin, past the laughing boys, directly at Darnell Cross, who was already turning away, already erasing the boy from the room the way you erase a mistake from a page. Marcus spoke, not loud, not breaking. Something quieter and more difficult to ignore than either of those things. "I'm the kind of voice that makes men who are walking away stop walking." He said, 3 plays, 1-on-1, you and me. Score once and you owe me $100 million. You won't stop me, not once." Cross turned back around. The gym went as quiet as a held breath. Marcus continued, same voice, same stillness. "I don't care how many championships you won. 3 plays. You will not stop me." For 2 full seconds, the room held still. Then Cross laughed. Not a chuckle. A full, open, expansive laugh that doubled him forward and brought his hand to his knee. He turned to his coaching staff and said, "Did you all hear that? $100 million. He pointed at Marcus the way you point at something that has briefly entertained you. "Kid doesn't have enough for registration, and he's standing in my building talking about $100 million. And that laughter moved through the room like a wave. Coaches, parents, Devin, the boys at half court. 150 people filling an expensive building with the sound of a 13-year-old boy being made into a joke. The security guard moved Marcus toward the exit. Marcus walked without resistance, his face jaw set, eyes burning, hand pressed over the knee brace. Was not the face of someone who had been defeated. It was the face of someone who had just decided something irreversible. Up in the second floor observation area, a man in a dark jacket lowered his phone. He had filmed the entire exchange from the moment Cross walked to the table. He was not laughing. He was already making a call. His name was Isaiah Drummond, and the number he dialed was answered before the second ring. Marcus rode the bus home with his forehead against the window and the knee brace pressed against his palm. He did not cry. He replayed every word Cross had said and let each one settle into him, not as damage, but as fuel, the kind that burns slow and hot and does not go out in rain. He whispered to the glass, 3 plays. That night he sat at the kitchen table in the apartment after Sandra had left for her shift, the knee brace laid flat in front of him under the kitchen light. He stared at the 2 letters for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and typed, Darnell Cross NBA career stats. He read everything. Every number, every season, every written analysis of Cross's defensive tendencies in isolation situations. When he finished, he looked at the knee brace and said to the empty room, Who are you? Who were you really? When the answer was not with Sandra, it was locked in a drawer in Roosevelt Webb's office at the community center, and it had been waiting there for 13 years. The apartment was still dark when Sandra got home the next morning. Marcus was already awake, sitting at the table with the brace in front of him like evidence. He asked the question directly, the way he did everything. Whose brace is this? Sandra set her bag down slowly. She looked at the initials the way people look at something that has cost them a great deal over a long time. She sat down and she told him everything. Deon Cole, his father, the most gifted point guard to come out of Compton's public courts in 20 years. Discovered at 16, developed quietly, signed to a professional development contract at 19. A first step so fast that scouts clocked it twice because they did not trust the first number. A basketball intelligence so advanced that coaches who had worked with first-round draft picks sat in the stands at his workouts and called each other before they left the parking lot. They called him a generational read of the game, a boy who could see 3 passes ahead the way a chess player sees 3 moves ahead. But Deon Cole was honest. He saw what was happening around him in the organization that had signed him. Black players funneled into shorter contracts with fewer guarantees. Black coaches with superior records passed over for men with connections and the right school on their resume. A culture that packaged exclusion as excellence and called the result a standard. Deon named it publicly. He cited numbers. He put names to things that powerful people needed to remain nameless. He was 20 years old and he made the people who held his future in their hands deeply structurally uncomfortable. 18 months after signing, his contract was not renewed. No other organization called. The silence was not random. It was coordinated in the way that silence among powerful people who share a common interest is always coordinated, quietly without paper, with complete effectiveness. Within 2 years, Deon Cole was working loading docks at a distribution warehouse in Carson. Within 4, the warehouse had taken his knees, his left shoulder, and every morning he had spent under the lights of a court believing the world would eventually be fair. He died at 31. The certificate listed cardiac complications. Sandra knew what it really was. The system had broken his body the way it breaks everything it cannot control. The grief finished the rest. Marcus was 2 years old. He remembers nothing of his father except warmth and the smell of leather. Sandra whispered, "Your father did not fail. He was too honest for a world that requires silence as the price of entry. That is not failure. That is a different kind of courage." Marcus sat with the brace, fingers moving along the old stitching, feeling every thread Sandra had used to put it back together after the original lacing wore through. This was not equipment. This was an unfinished sentence spoken by a man who never got to finish anything. The next morning he went to Roosevelt. Roosevelt did not look surprised when Marcus asked. He looked like a man who had been carrying a weight for a long time and had just been given permission to set it down. He said, "I played in the same development league as your father. 2 seasons. I was behind him in every category except experience. The best player I ever shared a court with. When they let him go, I wrote letters to 4 organizations. Not one replied." He paused and looked at his notebooks. "When you were 8 years old, throwing a tennis ball at a chalk circle on the community center wall and hitting the same spot 30 times in a row, I recognized something. I recognized his hands in your hands. I saw his read of space in the way your eyes moved before your feet did. So I started building. Everything Roosevelt had done in 5 years of notebooks was not sentiment. It was architecture. Every measurement, every tracked improvement, every documented drill session was a body of proof constructed with the precision of a man who understood exactly what it would need to defeat." Then Roosevelt taught Marcus something that made the room go still. He said, Your father had a move, not a trick. A move, he called it the ghost step. Standard drive approach, same shoulder drop, same head fake, same first step the defender has been calibrated to read. Then in the last 2 feet before the plant, a half-step stutter so small most eyes never register it. It shifts the defender's weight by 3 degrees. 3 degrees sounds like nothing. In basketball, 3 degrees is the difference between a block shot and a clear lane to the rim. Your father used it once per game, always less, always when it was the only thing left between him and the moment. And Roosevelt looked at Marcus. I have been saving this for when you were ready. I believe you are ready. Marcus drilled the ghost step every morning for the next month until it lived in his body the way breathing lives in a body, below thought, below effort, simply there when it was needed. That same week, a black car parked outside the community center fence. The man who stepped out wore a dark jacket and moved with the quiet certainty of someone who built things from the ground up and therefore understood the value of foundations. His name was Isaiah Drummond, 44 years old, raised in Inglewood, founder of a technology logistics company that had grown into something the financial press described as quietly dominant. And he had given $100 million to 3 different causes in the past 8 years without calling a press conference for any of them. He had filmed Marcus Cole at the Westside Elite Showcase because he had gone there for his nephew, and instead he had witnessed something that he recognized the way you recognize a language you grew up hearing. He said to Roosevelt, I was there. I saw what Cross did, and I saw what the boy did back. He looked at Marcus. You told that man $100 million, 3 plays. Did you mean every word of that? Marcus said, every single word. Drummond studied him the way someone studies the foundation of a building before deciding whether to put their name on it. Not measuring what was missing, measuring what was load-bearing. He said, then I will put up the money, you put up the game. The alliance was made. The fuse Marcus had lit at the showcase had just found its dynamite. Cross did not know that yet. By the time he found out, it would already be too late. You do not force a man like Darnell Cross into anything. Men like Darnell Cross have spent their entire lives arranging the world so that nothing is ever forced on them. You do not challenge the ego directly. You make the ego challenge itself. Drummond understood Cross the way a locksmith understands a mechanism, not by studying the surface, but by understanding what moves what. Cross's mechanism was legacy. Every coaching clinic, every TV appearance, every framed jersey in that trophy corridor existed to confirm a single belief. I am still the standard. Challenge that belief in public and Cross has only 2 options, respond or retreat. And for a man whose entire identity is built on the impossibility of retreat, there is really only one option. Drummond sent the formal challenge through Cross's management team. 1 public exhibition, 3 plays, 1-on-1, Marcus Cole versus Darnell Cross. Score once, Cross pays $100 million. Shut Marcus out, Drummond pays $100 million. Live ticketed broadcast. Cross's lawyers responded in under 5 hours. Mr. Cross respectfully declines. Drummond was counting on exactly that. The refusal was step 1. Step 2, the video. Drummond released the showcase footage. Not the formal challenge, just the moment. A 13-year-old boy in a faded hoodie and a worn knee brace telling a 2-time champion, you will not stop me, and being dragged out of a $60,000 gym while a room full of adults laughed. The clip was 47 seconds long. It hit social media like a stone dropped into still water, the ripples reaching further than anyone expected, faster than anyone predicted. The headline wrote itself everywhere it landed. Compton kid challenges NBA legend. I'll score in 3 plays. Champion says no. No. That single word did more damage to Darnell Cross than any basketball could. Within 24 hours, every sports talk platform in the country was arguing. Within 48, the conversation had gone national, and the racial dimension underneath it burned like a current no one could switch off. A wealthy former champion refusing to face a poor black boy from Compton on a basketball court. People who had never watched a basketball game in their life were sharing the clip with a fury that had nothing to do with sports and everything to do with recognition. Someone they knew was in that clip. Someone they had been was in that clip. The hashtag 3 plays trended for 4 days. Cross released a statement. He has nothing to prove against a minor. The internet does not read statements, it reads images. And the image of a grown man in a $200 training jacket pointing at a 13-year-old like he was a minor inconvenience was already doing the work that no statement could undo. A sports columnist wrote a piece with the headline, "Darnell Cross built an empire on the idea that excellence has a price of entry." A boy from Compton just sent the invoice. It was shared 900,000 times before noon. On the fifth day, Cross held a press conference. He stood behind a podium in front of his trophy corridor and delivered his acceptance with the controlled fury of a man who has decided that the best way to end a fire is to walk through it and come out the other side. He said, "Fine, I'll accept this for the sake of shutting down the circus. When it's over, I'll donate whatever is won to youth sports programs, and this boy can go back to his side of town, knowing what real competition looks like." His side of town. 3 words. They detonated across every platform before the press conference was even over. Cross meant it geographically. The world heard something that went back much further than geography. The event was scheduled for 4 weeks out. Tickets sold out in 9 minutes. A broadcast deal was signed the same afternoon. Back in Compton, inside the community center gym, the real work began. Roosevelt trained Marcus with a rigor that had no softness in it at all. Not because Roosevelt was a hard man, but because Darnell Cross was still Darnell Cross. 49 years old and still working out 4 days a week, still carrying the reaction time and lateral quickness that had made him a 2-time champion. Underestimating him was not an option. Roosevelt studied Cross with the same obsessive precision he had brought to 5 years of Marcus's development notebooks. Old game film, charity event footage, the defensive showcase video Cross had posted to social media in the weeks after the challenge went public. Designed to intimidate, analyzed instead as data. The film pointed to one critical vulnerability. Cross overcommitted on ball handlers who showed the same move twice. His career defensive numbers confirmed it. He was exceptional at pattern recognition and used that recognition to cheat early in the direction he expected the play to go. When he was right, he was spectacular. When he was wrong, he was completely out of position. He decided and then his body followed the decision all the way. No half measures, no recalibration. A defender who commits fully can be beaten by the space between his commitment and the truth. Roosevelt built the 3-play sequence like a man building something that has to hold weight. Play 1. Marcus drives right, crosses stronger defensive side, drawing him fully upright, calibrating Cross's eye to Marcus's speed and first step. Force the read. Play 2. Same drive initiation, same shoulder drop, with same first step, but Marcus pulls up at the elbow for the mid-range jumper, forcing Cross to adjust from drive defense to closeout mode. Now Cross has seen 2 different plays from identical setup. His brain is working to find the pattern. Play 3, the ghost step. Same setup, same shoulder drop, same first step initiation as plays 1 and 2. Cross reads drive, Cross commits, and in the last 2 feet, the half-step stutter that shifts Cross's weight by 3 degrees. 3 degrees that opens a lane that was not there a half second before. His father's move. Used once, used last, used when everything that came before it has built the exact conditions it requires. Marcus ran the sequence until it was no longer a sequence, but a single continuous thing his body knew without being asked. Roosevelt never let him throw the ghost step at full speed in any session where a phone could be recording. That move does not exist until the 3rd play. Your father invented it. It belongs to him until the moment it belongs to you. Marcus drilled the first 2 plays 500 times in 4 weeks. His knees ached. His ankles were taped every morning before 5:30 and retaped at noon. Sandra replaced the ice bags on the kitchen table every night before she left for her shift, pressing her hand once on his shoulder without saying anything, because some things do not need words and are only made smaller by them. 2 weeks before the event, a woman called Roosevelt's office phone. Her name was Patricia Owens, a sports journalist who had spent 12 years covering the intersection of race and professional athletics, and she had found the thread Drummond had carefully planted in the public record. She said, "I know who this boy's father is." Roosevelt was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Then you know why this matters beyond basketball." Patricia Owens did not write the story yet. She held it. The night before the event, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed with a knee brace across his palms. Sandra stood in the doorway, still in her scrubs, 12 hours behind her and too tired to sit down, but too awake to sleep. She said, "I am not going to tell you to win. I am going to tell you what I should have told you years ago. Your father was the best basketball mind I ever saw and the most honest man I ever knew. They took the first thing from him because he refused to give up the second. Tomorrow you walk onto that floor carrying both. He started something. You get to finish it." Marcus held the brace against his chest, the old neoprene, the worn thread, the two letters pressed into his sternum like a second heartbeat. Not grief, a promise made to a man he never got to know. Tomorrow, 14,000 people would finally learn what those two letters meant, and one of them, the one standing on the other side of the court, was going to wish he had never laughed. The arena looked like it had been built specifically for a reckoning. A single half-court setup, center floor, ringed by camera positions from 3 national broadcast partners. The rest of the building in shadow. 14,000 seats filled before the doors officially opened, another 2 million streaming across 6 platforms. The Jumbotron cycled a simple countdown, 3 plays. The air had the particular density of spaces where something irreversible is about to happen, and everyone present can feel it without being able to name it exactly. Cross emerged from the tunnel first. Custom warm-up set in the colors of his championship teams, his old number on the back. He carried himself the way a man carries himself when he has decided the outcome already, slowly, deliberately, letting the building absorb the fact of him. The crowd gave him the welcome of the familiar, a roar that carried recognition and nostalgia and the specific warmth people give to something that has always been exactly what it said it was. He tipped his head once toward the crowd, found the camera, and smiled the smile of a man who knows exactly where the camera is. Then Marcus walked out, opposite tunnel, alone, faded gray hoodie, her dark shorts, sneakers that had been worn before, the knee brace on his left knee, 2 letters visible from the second row. No entourage. Roosevelt stood at the scorer's table by rule, not allowed on the floor. Drummond sat in a courtside seat, still as carved stone. Marcus walked to the center circle with the unhurried steps of someone carrying something no one else in the building could see. The roar dropped to a murmur. He looked impossibly small. A boy standing in a circle of white light 60 feet from a man who had spent his entire adult life stopping people from getting where they were trying to go. The commentary filled the quiet, recapped the story, the odds, the stakes. A retired defensive specialist on the broadcast panel said, "Cross was a nightmare in isolation. 49 years old and I've watched his charity game footage. The hands are still there. The anticipation is still there. I have to be honest, I don't see it for the kid." Then the Jumbotron changed. The countdown disappeared. The screen went black. 1 full second of silence, long enough for 14,000 people to notice the absence of sound. Then a video began. It opened on Compton. The courts, the cracked asphalt, the faded lines, the chain-link fence. Then Roosevelt's community center gym, the worn floor, the taped lines, the milk crate by the fence. Marcus at 5:30 in the dark, alone, drilling. Raw footage, intimate, close. Then the screen filled with a single photograph, a young black man in a professional development uniform, mid-dribble, left hand extended, eyes reading the floor ahead of him with the calm of someone who sees 3 moves before anyone else. On his knee, a brace. 2 letters, DC. A headline appeared, Dion Cole, the point guard who could see 3 moves ahead, 90 seconds. Who Dion Cole was, the development contract, the honesty that cost him everything, the blacklisting that never appeared on paper but was complete, the loading dock, the death at 31, white text on black at the end. His son, Marcus Cole, stands on this floor tonight. He is wearing his father's brace. The building absorbed it the way a body absorbs something that changes the shape of things. Silence first. The kind of silence that is not empty but full, packed with 14,000 people processing the same information at the same moment. Then a sound that was not cheering and was not crying and was something that exists between those two things. Sorry, something that only happens when a room of strangers simultaneously recognizes something true. Cameras found Sandra in her seat, both hands pressed flat against her mouth, tears moving down her face without any expression to accompany them. Just tears, coming from a place that had been sealed for a very long time. Cameras found Roosevelt, head bowed over the scorer's table, one hand over his eyes. Cameras found Drummond, fist closed at his side, jaw set, eyes bright. Then the cameras found Cross. He was standing at the top of the key, ball at his side, staring at the Jumbotron. His face had changed. He knew the boy's first name. He had not known the last name meant that. He had not known that the child he mocked and pointed at and had removed from his building was the son of Dion Cole, it whose development contract had been with an organization Darnell Cross had consulted for in the year it was terminated. Whether Cross had known the specifics did not matter now. He was standing in an arena in front of 14,000 people and 2 million more, holding the weight of what the screen had just said, and his certainty, that absolute, unshakable certainty that had been the foundation of everything he had ever built, had developed a crack running straight through its center. In his courtside seat, Drummond leaned forward and said quietly to the empty chair beside him, "This one is for you, Dion." At the scorer's table, Roosevelt opened his notebook to the last page. His own handwriting, 5 years old, the first entry. This boy is his father's hands. Below it, written that morning in fresh ink, 3 plays, finish it. He held the notebook up so Marcus could see it across the floor. Marcus read it. He gave Roosevelt the nod, the same nod, the only nod, the one that meant everything was already decided and had been for a long time. The official stepped to center court. The arena went to a silence that was almost physical, something you could press your hand against. Play 1. Marcus stood at the top of the key, the brace pressed against his left knee, his father's initials against his skin. Cross settled into his defensive stance across from him, feet wide, weight balanced, hands active, eyes locked on Marcus's midsection the way every elite defender is trained, reading the body, not the ball, not the eyes. He looked completely ready. He looked like a man who had stopped 14,000 plays in his career and was entirely prepared to stop this one. Marcus drove right. The first step was precise and explosive, a first step that belonged on a different floor at a different level. And the 14,000 people who saw it understood immediately that the number on the broadcast graphic, 13 years old, did not match what their eyes were processing. Cross moved laterally, cut off the angle, forced Marcus to pull up at the wing. Marcus rose, released, a clean pull-up jumper that caught the back of the rim and fell away. No score. The play was exactly what it was designed to be, not a made basket, a calibration. Marcus gave Cross his speed, his release point, his drive angle. Cross's brain received the information and filed it. In a gifted defender's filing system is also his vulnerability, if you understand what he is filing. Cross smiled slightly. Not cruelty this time. Something closer to relief. The relief of a man who has been told a thing and finds the thing to be manageable. He said nothing. Marcus said nothing. Play 2. Same top of key position. Marcus showed the same shoulder drop, the same weight shift that preceded the right drive in play 1. Cross read it. His weight began to move. Marcus took one hard step right and pulled up immediately, mid-range from the elbow, releasing before Cross's closeout could arrive. The ball left Marcus's hand, arced, and fell through the net without touching anything but nylon. Score. The arena erupted. Marcus had 1 play to go. Cross stepped back. For the first time since the event began, he was not smiling. Where he was computing. 2 plays from identical setup, 2 different results. His brain was working the way elite defensive brains work, building a model, preparing a response. He dug his feet in slightly wider. He decided consciously that he would not commit early. He would wait. He would read. This is what the ghost step was made for. Not speed, not power. The space between a defender's decision and his commitment. The exact space that opens when a man has decided to be more careful and in doing so has made himself fractionally slower. Play 3. The arena noise dropped on its own, as if the building understood. Marcus stood at the top of the key. 14,000 people were standing. 2 million more were watching a screen. Roosevelt's hands were on the scores table. Sandra's hands were pressed together. Where Drummond had not moved in 4 minutes. Cross was set, wide, waiting. Everything he had learned from the 2 plays organized into a defensive position, designed to take away what he thought was coming. Marcus began the same shoulder drop, the same first step initiation. Cross read drive, the same drive he had seen twice before. His weight began to shift, and in the last 2 feet before the plant, before Cross's commitment was complete, Marcus took the go step, the half-step stutter, the 3-degree shift. His father's move, invented on a Compton court before Marcus was born, preserved in the body of a man who loved Deon Cole enough to spend 5 years giving it to his son. Cross's weight finished its commitment to a drive that did not come. The lane open. Not wide, not by much. 3 degrees. Enough. Marcus accelerated through the space, rose at the left block, and laid the ball off the glass with the same softness he used at 5:30 in the morning on a court with no net when the only person watching was an old man on a milk crate with a stopwatch and 4 notebooks full of proof. The ball rolled around the rim once, an eternity compressed into a single rotation, and fell through. Score. The sound that came out of that building was not a cheer. It was something older than a cheer. It was 14,000 people releasing something they had been holding, not just tonight, not just for the length of this event, but for a long time before any of them walked through those doors. It started as a roar and became something that did not have a clean name in the language of sports arenas. It was grief and triumph and recognition and the particular joy of watching something true when in a room where true things have not always won. Cross stood at the top of the key, hands at his sides, staring at the basket. Then he looked at Marcus. The boy was not celebrating. He was standing at the left block with the knee brace visible under the arena lights, one hand pressed over the initials, looking up at the rafters the way you look at something that isn't there for anyone else, but is absolutely there for you. His lips moved, barely, a single word spoken to the ceiling of a building, to a man he never knew, to the other half of a sentence that had been waiting 13 years to be finished. Daddy. Sandra collapsed forward in her seat, both arms wrapped around herself, a sound coming out of her that had no shape, just release. Years and years of it finally having somewhere to go. Roosevelt did not try to hold anything back. He stood at the scores table with tears on his face and his notebook open to that last page, and he looked at those 2 words in fresh ink, and he said to no one, "We did it, Deon. We did it." Drummond stood in his courtside seat with his fist raised and his eyes closed, and something moving across his face that the cameras caught and could not caption. 3 plays, 2 points, 1 ghost. Darnell Cross did something no one in that building predicted. He waited for the noise to reach its peak, and then he walked slowly across the court, from the top of the key to the left block where Marcus was standing. He stopped in front of the boy. His face had the look of a man who has had something taken apart inside him in public and is still in the process of understanding what it was. He extended his hand. Marcus shook it. Cross said, "Your father was the best point guard I ever watched in a development setting." I did not say that when I should have. The words were not an apology. They were something harder to produce than an apology, an admission, a public acknowledgement from a man whose entire structure was built on never admitting anything, that something he had been part of was wrong. Marcus looked at him and said, "You should have let him play." 6 words. Cross absorbed them the way a wall absorbs an impact, taking the full force of it without moving. He nodded once, turned, and walked off the court. His son Devin was in the tunnel watching. Devin looked at his father with eyes that would not see him the same way again, and that too was a kind of reckoning, smaller than the one on the floor, quieter but no less permanent. Drummond met Marcus and Roosevelt and Sandra at the scorer's table. He opened his hand and placed in Marcus's palm a folded piece of paper. It was a document establishing the Deon Cole Foundation, endowed with $100 million, dedicated to funding youth basketball development in underserved communities across Los Angeles and eventually the country. Marcus's name was listed as first ambassador. Roosevelt Webb was listed as founding director of player development. Sandra Cole was listed as a member of the board of directors. Marcus read it twice. Then he looked up at Drummond and said, "This is my father's money." Drummond said, "It always was." His son just came to collect it. Patricia Owens published her piece the following morning. It ran 1,200 words and was accompanied by Drummond's footage, Roosevelt's notebooks photographed in full, Sandra's testimony, and the development organization's internal correspondence that Owens had obtained through a source who had carried it for 15 years, waiting for the right moment. The story did not ask whether Dion Cole was blacklisted. It answered the question with documentation. The organization issued a formal statement expressing regret for the circumstances that ended Dion Cole's career. Institutional language, careful and limited, but it was the first time in 13 years that anyone in a position of authority had said his name in public and attached the word wrong to it. Sandra read it at the kitchen table, the knee brace between her hands. She said, "To no one, to everyone, to the man whose name was finally in print the way it deserved to be, they finally said who you were." The Westside Elite Youth Basketball Academy removed its registration fee within the week and established a scholarship program for players from underserved communities. The $4,800 barrier that had kept Compton on the other side of the expressway was gone. Cross resigned his directorship the same day, without a statement, without a press conference. The trophy corridor remained. The standard it claimed to represent had been replaced. In the weeks that followed, something happened that no arena or broadcast deal or foundation document could have produced on its own. The clip of play 3, the ghost step, the 3-degree shift. The ball rolling once and falling through became the most shared sports moment of the year. Not because of the stakes, because of what came before it, because 14,000 people and then 40 million more had watched a boy stand in a room full of laughter, aimed at everything he was, and refused to become smaller. People who had been told their side of the city was the wrong side recognized themselves in that refusal. People who had watched something honest be buried recognized Dion Cole's story as a story they knew by a different name. Street artists painted Marcus's face on walls in Compton, in Watts, in neighborhoods in Atlanta, in Detroit, and Houston that had their own versions of a 12-mile distance and what lived on either side of it. Someone painted it on the brick wall next to the Willowbrook Community Center, right beside the court with the faded lines, and wrote below it in clean letters, "Finish what they started." Roosevelt Webb retired from the community center after 31 years. On his last morning, he taped 2 photographs to the wall of the back office. On the left, Dion Cole and Roosevelt Webb at 22, arms over each other's shoulders in Development League uniforms, grinning at a camera someone else was holding. On the right, Marcus Cole at the left block, one hand on his father's knee brace, looking up. 2 photographs, 2 generations. One unbroken line drawn in cracked leather and stitched thread, and a notebook no one else knew existed until it was time for everyone to know. Marcus enrolled in the National Youth Elite Development Program, the most competitive youth basketball pipeline in the country, carrying 2 things on his first day: a new equipment bag from Drummond and his father's knee brace. He wore it on his left knee. He would wear it every day he was on a court for the rest of his career. Not as a memorial, as a reminder of what it costs to be honest in a world that prices honesty out of reach, and what it means when someone pays that cost so that you can stand somewhere they never got to stand. This story is not finally about basketball. Basketball is just the language it chose to speak in. This is about a man named Roosevelt Webb who sat on a milk crate in the dark at 5:30 in the morning for 5 years, building something in secret because he had loved a man whose gifts were taken from him, and he had decided that what was taken would be returned through patience, through precision, through 4 notebooks full of a boy becoming what his father was never allowed to become. He did not do it for recognition. He did it because some debts are not owed to the living. This is about a woman named Sandra Cole who worked double shifts for 13 years and never once told her son to be less than what he was, who handed a breakfast bag through a chain-link fence in the dark and watched 5 pitches and went back to a shift that would break most people, who said, "You get to finish what your father started," not because she needed him to win something, but because she had watched something true be buried, and she was not going to let the burial be the end of the sentence. This is about a man named Isaiah Drummond who heard a 13-year-old make an impossible promise to a room full of laughter. And instead of laughing, we listened. Who recognized conviction the way people who have built things from nothing recognize it, as the only foundation that does not shift. Who placed $100 million behind a boy's word, not because the odds were good, but because some things are worth more than odds. And this is about a knee brace. Worn, old, held together with thread that Sandra replaced twice before Marcus was old enough to ask why. Carrying 2 letters that stood for a man who was too good and too honest for the world that held his future in its hands. Deon Cole never got to throw his last move. His son made it for him. And in the impossible 3 degrees of a half-step stutter, in the space between a defender's decision and his commitment, a man who had been silenced for 13 years finally finished his sentence. 3 plays. That is all it took. To break open a system that called itself a standard. To say a name that the machine of ambition and fear had tried to make permanent silence. To prove that excellence does not ask permission, not from your zip code, not from your bank account, not from the color of your skin, not from the laughter of people who have never had to build anything from the bottom and therefore do not understand what the bottom can produce. Marcus Cole stood on a free court at 5:30 in the morning with a slow leak basketball and his father's brace on his knee. And he told a 2-time NBA champion, "You will not stop me." He was right. If this story moves something in you, if you felt what happened when that ball rolled once and fell through, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Leave a comment and tell me what your 3 plays are. What is the moment you are moving toward? The one where everything that was taken from someone you love is finally fully returned. Subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell. We tell the stories that do not get told anywhere else. The next one is already waiting, and you will not want to miss it. One last image. Marcus Cole on the free court behind the Willowbrook Community Center. Dawn. The sky the color it is before the sun commits to rising. Mist on the asphalt. He stands alone at the top of a key that exists mostly in imagination. He adjusts his father's brace. He takes 1 dribble, drops his shoulder, and drives. In the last 2 feet, the ghost step. 3 degrees. The lane opens. He rises. He finishes. He looks up.